If you're a nanny working more than 40 hours a week, or parents who's paying your nanny overtime, this might be the first piece of good financial news that you've heard in a long time. Starting in 2026, there's a new federal tax rule that allows part of your nanny's overtime pay to be federal income tax free. That means higher take-home pay for your nannies and better retentions for families without changing your nanny's hourly rate. But here's the problem. Most people have already misunderstood this law. They think all overtime is tax-free, and it is not. There are still income limits, reporting rules, and very specific IRS requirements that you have to follow for this to actually work. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 2026 nanny overtime tax break in plain English so that you can legally keep more money in your pocket and, of course, avoid the tax mistakes that could get families in trouble with the IRS. Now, let's clear up the biggest myth right now. Your entire overtime paycheck is not tax-free. Only the overtime premium, which is the extra portion of your time and a half pay, that qualifies for the federal tax break. And this is what it actually looks like. Let's say your normal hourly pay rate is $20 an hour. Overtime pay is $30 an hour. So the first $20 is still taxed normally. The extra $10, that's the overtime premium. Only the extra $10 in overtime qualifies for the federal income tax break. If you work, let's say, 10 hours of overtime in a week, that's $100 of income that may not be subject to federal income tax. Over a full year, that can add up to thousands of dollars in extra take-home pay without working more hours. Now, please note that this benefit only applies if you meet all 4 of these rules. Rule number 1, you must be a W-2 employee. If you're being paid under the table or you're 1099, you don't qualify. And yes, most nannies are legally required, or at least supposed to be, W-2 household employees under IRS and federal labor law. Rule number 2, overtime must be 40 hours in a week. Federal tax rules follow the federal overtime law. So if your state has daily overtime rules, those extra daily hours do not count for federal tax break unless you go over 40 hours in a 7-day work week. Rule number 3, there are income limits. Now, here is an important caveat about this benefit. It starts to disappear once your income gets too high. The overtime tax break is designed for working families and caregivers. So the deduction begins to phase out once your modified adjusted gross income exceeds a certain limit. If you're a single filer, the deduction begins to phase out once your MAGI goes above $150,000. If you're married and filing jointly, the phase out starts once your MAGI goes above $300,000. Once you get above those thresholds, the benefits can be reduced or eliminated entirely. This means that the higher your household income, the less of the overtime premium you'll be able to deduct from federal taxable income. Rule number 4, live-in nannies may not qualify. Under federal laws, some live-in nannies are exempt from overtime requirements. If your employer isn't legally required to pay overtime, the tax break usually doesn't apply either. This is why proper classification and payroll setup matters so much. If you're set up incorrectly, you don't just lose these tax benefits, you lose legal protections altogether. Now, let's talk about what this law does not do, because the headlines online can be very misleading. This only affects federal income tax on the overtime premium portion. You still owe Social Security tax, Medicare tax, and most state income tax. So no, this is not a tax-free overtime across the board. But for most families and nannies, this still means saving about 10% to 22% on part of overtime pay, depending on your tax bracket. That's real money back into your pocket, legally. If you want to feel these benefits in your pocket, instead of waiting until tax season, here's what you actually do. For nannies, you can update your W-4s with your employers. There's a section that allows you to account for deductions, so less federal tax is withheld from your paycheck. This helps you take home more money each week instead of overpaying and waiting for a refund. For parents or household employers, Your payroll system must correctly track your overtime hours and overtime premium pay. If you use a nanny payroll system or payroll service, you should ask them directly. You should say, hey, does your system track FLSA overtime premium separately for the 2026 tax reporting? If your payroll isn't set up correctly, this tax break doesn't get applied properly and you lose the benefits. There are caps on how much overtime pay you can qualify each year, and this law is not permanent. This is currently set up as a temporary tax benefit, meaning families and nannies should treat this as a short-term financial advance, not as something to build permanent budgets around. This is why it is so smart to use this money in a strategic way to pay down debt, build emergency savings, or offset childcare costs, instead of course, assuming that it will last forever, because it might not. For nannies, this is one of the first policies that actually recognizes how demanding overtime care actually is. Those long hours finally come with a little financial relief. For parents, this can make paying overtime more sustainable because your nanny takes home pay increases without you having to raise their hourly rates. Remember, this only works if payroll is set up legally and correctly. If you're paying under the table, you're missing out on this benefit, and of course, you're putting yourself in serious legal and financial risk. If this video has helped you, send it to one of your nanny friends or a parent who is working crazy hours right now, because they are probably leaving money on the table without even realizing it. Bye guys.